I'm here. And little Teddy, the feral one, the feral cat, is here. Dave's here too. Dave isn't feral. Dave is the opposite of feral, aren't you, Dave? Dave did catch a cricket once, though. It might have been a praying mantis. I can't really tell the difference very well, but it was a jumping insect, and Dave caught it, and she left it on the doorstep as an offering to me. So Dave obviously does have feral cat skills as well. All right. Cinty says, I'm eating non-stop now that I'm in recovery, but I always eating way past fullness, wanting to keep eating and eating. How can I tell I'm not now got binge eating disorder? Love the term binge eating disorder. And or just eating out of emotional depression eating. I love the term emotional eating as well. Eating myself into obesity feel like. Well, okay, so the problem that I have with the term binge eating disorder is the bit that says disorder at the end, because the word disorder implies that something is disordered, or that there's something is not ideal, or that something is going wrong. And binge eating is not disordered, because binge eating is a biological response to restriction. And so it's a bit like saying, say if you don't drink anything all day, really parched, and then you're just not able to drink anything, you're so thirsty. And then when you start drinking, you're gulping down, and somebody says, that's a gulping disorder. No one's going to do that. Because you know why? Because people go like, oh, look, well, you're gulping drink down because you haven't drunk anything all day. That's not disorder, that's normal. It's the same with binge eating. If you've been restricting food, your body is going to gasp for food, and it's going to try and gulp food down, which means it's going to try and intake a load of food at once. And that's what binge eating is. But the problem is because we're in a society that's terrified of food, even more scared of people gaining weight. People go like, oh, that's a disorder, you're eating a lot of food, that's a disorder. If you hold your breath and then you gasp for air, nobody goes, breathing disorder right there, sort it out. People go like, oh, well, that's normal, don't worry, it'll stop once you've got enough air in you. And it's the same with binge eating. It's not a disorder, it's a response. It's a really intelligent one if you think about it. It's super smart. The body's like, you're restricting, therefore I'm going to take in a load of food to save your life, asshole. And then everyone's like, well, that's disordered, body's got it wrong. There's nothing disordered about binging after restriction. And here's the catch, because where everybody goes, well, I'm not restricting. And I go, I bet you are. Because we live in a culture that's fat phobic and afraid of weight gain. And so therefore we live in a culture that normalizes a degree of restriction. And so most people think that a degree of restriction is just normal eating. And so that is why a lot of people do not see that they're restricting when they are restricting. And then they wonder why they start to binge. And I've forgotten what the question was, Cinty. I'll read it again. How do you know that you've not got binge eating disorder? Because you've been restricting, love. And until you stop restricting, and it takes a while, you have to stop restricting for a long time, and that binging will calm down if you properly do unrestricted eating. And then I guess you'll work out, well, obviously I don't have a disorder because I stopped restricting, and eventually the binging stopped. Just like when you stop holding your breath, you'll gasp, and then eventually the gasping will stop. But it just takes longer. With the whole food system takes longer. You've got the air system. That's the one that's always most immediate. Hold your breath. You immediately know I'm holding my breath. You stop holding your breath, you're immediately gasping. And then you've got the water system. Takes a little bit longer than the air system. It's a couple of hours when you're not drinking water, and then it's a day or so you could survive. Maybe not even a day. I don't know how long a person can survive without drinking water, but anyway, it's shorter than the food one. The food one goes on, like, that's the longest we can sustain. We can usually restrict quite heavily for a couple of weeks before the body starts to freak out properly about it. And so everything is just on that scale. You gasp for air, doesn't take very long for your body to get over gasping for air. But the food system, your body's going to gasp for food for longer, because it's just the whole metabolizing and then turning food into energy and putting it certain places. I mean, it takes a while, doesn't it? So don't be in a rush. And don't get all like, oh, well, I didn't restrict today, so why am I still binging? Because it takes longer than that. You're going to have to not restrict for a pretty long time before your body trusts that there's ample food in the environment. It's just because it's smart. It just makes sense. If you just think about it on biological terms, it all makes sense. Stop saying things are disordered when they're not. All right. Ida says thank you. Welcome. Carmen says, why is being overweight considered so unhealthy? Fucking good question, Carmen. Does it actually cause all these health conditions, or is it a matter of correlation and not causation? Well, if you look at that question with an open mind, I was just talking about how we live in a culture that sort of normalizes restrictive eating, and we live in a culture that is fat phobic and afraid of weight gain. So you got to take that as understanding that as a cultural bias, which means that we are born into this culture. It means that most people, it's an implicit bias, which means that most people don't even know that they are fat phobic and afraid of weight gain. And it's because it's not like it happens like, you get to 12 years old and then you have a class at school which is titled How to Be Fat Phobic, and you get taught it. And that's why we don't it doesn't, most of us are not aware of it, because it's not that obvious. It's not. It's cultural biases are seeped in the culture. It's like imagine something's in the water that you're drinking. You're just drinking the water, and you've been drinking the water for so long it tastes normal, and you don't even know there's stuff in it. You get born into a culture that just as you're growing up as a little icky baby, as you're growing up, is just showing you thin is good and fat is bad and restriction is normal and blah, 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 and this is what's healthy and this is what not. So you don't even think about it. You just accept it to be what is normal about the world and what is true about the world. And then those little babies that have been taught that, not obviously, but taught that via seeping it in through our culture, go up to be researchers and health professionals, and they just still believe that this is what's true about the world. In the same way, people that have been born into religious backgrounds also go on to be researchers and health professionals, and they still believe that despite the fact they're doing all this science, that God with his hands made the world in 7 days. And I struggle with that. I do. And I come from religious, my mother is Christian. And for a while, I did believe that God made the world in 7 days. And then I just started to think about it. And I was like, well, first of all, how did his little hands do all that work? It's just, or his hands really big? And if his hands are really big, because you think about it, your hands are going to be really big to make the world. You could have huge hands. So how did those huge hands make an ant? I just would need answer to those sorts of questions before I'm going to believe that. And so I don't. But that's my choice. I'm not. If you believe in God, you do your thing. But what I'm just using that to illustrate implicit bias and how we get born into cultural things, and we just take things to be true because we're told them that they're true, and the culture says it's true, and then we take that truth with us to everything else we do. And so therefore, the people who are doing the research into health and blah and blah blah, they also have the bias that says thin is good and fat is bad. And that's an issue, because that means that there's no such thing as unbiased research. And I don't know if that's even possible. I don't think it's possible for humans to do unbiased research, because we're so socially geared to build belief systems and that sort of thing. Even people that think that they're unbiased and have done a lot of work and trying to be unbiased and are even aware of cultural biases are still biased. It's a big problem, and I'm not going to solve it today. I'm not going to even try, because I have 2 really cute cats here. Oh my God. How can you be stressed about something or even think about big questions when you have something that adorable on your lap? It's just not possible. Okay. What's the next one? Maddie says, I feel like I need to lose more weight to be allowed to recover, said every person with an eating disorder ever. I struggle with failure, so I want to be perfect eating disorder. It's like talking to an eating disorder, Maddie. You're supposed to be in recovery, which means we don't listen to eating disorder thoughts. So You just gotta let's not even worry about that thought anymore, because every single person with an eating disorder ever has had that thought. And what we have to do is we just have to label that thought as unproductive bullshit, fear-based thought. And when that thought comes up, you go, bing, go away. And actually, what I'd like you to do, Maddie, just to prove to your brain that you really do not give that thought any value whatsoever, I would like you to do the opposite thing that thought would sort of lead you towards doing. So that thought is going to lead you towards being like, well, I'm going to restrict more and lose more weight. That's what that thought's trying to lead you to do, in order to teach the brain that we don't like that thought at all. And actually, we're gonna dislike it so much that we're actually going to do the opposite thing. What you need to do every time that thought comes up, Maddie, you need to eat food, and not carrots. Eat high fat, high calorie food. Every single time that thought comes up, it's like a drinking game, but with food and with your thoughts, okay? So just play this drinking game with me. Every time that thought comes up, or one similar to it, pop something in your mouth. It's fun. It'll be fun. You'll enjoy it, I promise. And you won't even get drunk. Okay. I've just got time for one more, because I have to spend very important snuggle time with Teddy. I'm sure that you will all understand that. Very important for my mental health, isn't it, Teddy? All right. Okay. Lost my place. Fuck's sake. George. Hey, Tabitha. How do you handle unrestricted eating without freaking out every other day? Well, honestly, George, I do think it's a choice to freak out. And I'm not even being facetious when I say that. I genuinely do think it is a choice to freak out. And the reason that you choose to freak out is because you're afraid of weight gain. And so as long as you can understand, like, what I need to do in order to recover, I have to rewire fear of weight gain. In order to rewire fear of weight gain, I have to show my brain that I'm not afraid of weight gain. Then can you see how even the action of getting involved in freaking out kind of reinforces fear of weight gain? It's a bit like, if you're afraid of a snake, and then you're like, all right, I'm going to teach my brain not to be afraid of a snake. The path to doing so would not be to go into a room full of snakes and start screaming your head off. Like, that's just not going to teach your brain anything, is it? So, because the action of you freaking out kind of further shows your brain that obviously I'm freaking out because snakes are scary. So, and the brain's watching you freak out and going, well, obviously snakes are scary because my human's freaking out about them. And so the way that you would, if you wanted to teach your brain not to be afraid of snakes, you'd have to go into that room of snakes and be like, not going to freak out, 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 not going to let myself freak out. Whatever I do, I'm not going to freak out. And if you went in there with that intention, you'd probably be really successful at not freaking out, especially if you have an eating disorder, because people with eating disorders, I think we're just genetically quite badass and quite hard. And when we've decided to do something, we're going to do it. And so if you just made the decision, I'm going to go into that room full of snakes and I'm not going to freak out, I bet you'd do it. So that's what I'm at when I'm sort of saying it is a choice, if we're honest, if you're really, really honest, it's a choice, and you're choosing to freak out because you're afraid of weight gain. I get it. But also you got to see, like, well, until I teach my brain I'm not afraid of weight gain, none of this is going to get any easier and none of it's going to change. And so that is why eating disorder recovery is really fear response management, because it's how do I manage my fear response? How do I manage my desire to freak out? How do I want to freak out and not let myself freak out? Because if you can control that, if you can manage your desire to freak out, and if you can force yourself not to freak out, you are then in your parasympathetic nervous system. Remember, the sympathetic nervous system is the freak out one. Parasympathetic nervous one is the actual thinking brain, rational person one. And then because you're in your parasympathetic nervous system, you're able to problem solve more, and you're actually able to deal with a situation more. Whereas if you're running around like a headless chicken, you're no good to anyone. So in an answer to that question, how do I handle unrestricted eating without freaking out every day? Understand the reason that you're freaking out is because you're afraid of gaining weight. And the thing that you have to do if you want to fully recover from an eating disorder is rewire your fear of weight gain, which means you're actually not allowed to let yourself freak out. And then a lot of the time, if you can turn something into a willpower thing, people with eating disorders are excellent at willpower. If you decide, I'm not going to let myself freak out, it becomes a willpower thing and you won't let yourself freak out. You'll be really good at it, I promise. George, you wrote loads of questions. This is a continuum. I'll be allowing myself to eat whatever I want and feast on peanut butter and chips all day for a few days and then freak out and try and compensate. In the long run, I'm still gaining weight because I don't restrict as hard as I used to, but the yo-yo is hard to handle. Wouldn't it be easier to limit myself to a high but not too high calorie number to prevent compensating behavior? Well, no, because compensating behavior doesn't happen to you. You choose to do it. The only thing that can prevent compensating behavior is you choosing not to do it. And that is something that you can control, and that is something that you can do. But the bigger thing is that if you limit yourself to a calorie number, guess what, George? You're restricting. And how do you recover from a restrictive eating disorder if you're restricting? The answer is you don't recover, because you can't rewire fear of weight gain when you are still actively engaging in a behavior restriction that is caused by fear of weight gain. That is like trying to teach yourself not to be afraid of snakes when going in the room of snakes and screaming and running out. You're actually just making your fear worse at that point. The only way to teach your brain not to be afraid of something is by acting and showing your brain that you're not afraid of that thing. And so if you're restricting food at all, you're not showing your brain that you're not afraid of weight gain. And unless you teach your brain that you're not afraid of weight gain, fear of weight gain won't go away. And if fear of weight gain doesn't go away, then none of the negative thoughts and emotions and things that are trying to scare you off gaining weight will go away. Do you see what I'm getting at, George? Because it's super important that you understand this neural rewiring and changing those belief systems, that the belief systems that actually govern your restrictive behaviors and all those fear-based thoughts and emotions and reactions. We have to change those belief systems in order to fully and sustainably recover from restrictive eating disorder. And you do not change those belief systems by acting in accordance with them. Restriction is acting in accordance with them. And with that, I promised little Teddy, always clawing at Teddy doesn't want to get up. Teddy, we have to go and snuggle. Like, Teddy knows how to relax, don't you, baby? You know what the cutest thing about him is that when he falls asleep, he snores. And it's a really tiny little snore. It's the smallest little cat snore, but he actually snores. And it is the happiest sound in the world, is a little cat snoring. Nothing makes me happier than that. Anyway, all right, gotta go. Bye.